How's it going, friends? Welcome back to the Church Bird Podcast here with Pastor Nick, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Palos Verdes in Greater Los Angeles. And here on the Church Bird Podcast, we talk about post-sermon, post-church, post-service, post-everything, post-cultural thoughts about everything that's going on that you can't really talk about in a sermon and all of that. Something that has happened to me that I'm sure has happened to not a few folks is that I got really sick the week of Christmas. And so as of recording this is Sunday, December 29th, the last Sunday of 2024. And I got dog sick, like just, it was the worst I've been sick in probably 7 or so years. Because I don't get sick, but when I do get sick, I get, as Smokey says, I get knocked the you-know-what out. Like I'm just out. And so we had a Sunday service. Then we had a Christmas Eve service, and then of course we have Christmas, and then we have Sunday service after that. And so that's 3 services over the course of, a week. The first 2 while I was sick. And so it's always odd just explaining, being sick and being, a pastor and being involved. And it's just, there's always so much going on that people never see or never realize. But something I've noticed during this time when I was out, I was really struck by what Paul kind of had to deal with. So the Apostle Paul, and the text for today was Romans 12, 1 through 12. And it was about spiritual gifts and calling and mission and ministry and what God have you or me or us do. And so as I preached on that, I reflected back, which I asked my church to do, to remember and to reflect, about all that God has done, is doing, and will do for us and for our sakes and for our salvation. I increasingly came to this sort of almost longing awareness that God is just incredibly generous and incredibly good. And it's something we all know. If we're Christians, if you've been a Christian for any period of time, God is good, all the time, right? But it's another thing to reflect on it and to kind of embody it as an actual reality. It's one thing to think something in your head. It's another thing to have it be joined to your heart. So, the hope of the Christian is head and heart meeting together in service and in love and in knowledge and in wisdom for serving others. And so one thing I challenge the church and myself to do is to reflect and pray about spiritual gifts, things that the Lord has gifted to us in service of his church and the world. And one thing I noticed when I was looking back upon, the previous week being sick, was this kind of almost deep sense of longing that I think for many Christians, there is this lingering or continual sense of unworthiness, that we are unworthy, that we do not deserve the mercy of God or the grace of God, or how could God love someone like me or like you or like us? And in one sense, that's a very normal thing to feel or to experience, right? It's not easy. The love of God is not an easy thing. Some people make it love is this and love is that. And it's like, no, the love of God is something incredibly difficult, not because it's difficult to understand. It's difficult to kind of take for yourself, to recognize that God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, that God has made an atoning sacrifice for us, for the sins of the whole world, that God, that the love of Christ compels us or kind of puts pressure on us to be reconcilers of humankind, both between brother and sister, and also between human and God, and that God has actually made reconciliation in Jesus Christ as an offering to the entire cosmic order. And that notion of gifts, when God gives gifts, I think one difficulty that Christians have is accepting the gift and then doing something with it. Because once you accept a gift, you're obligated to it, right? Once you accept friendship from someone or a phone number from someone, you're kind of obligated to be friends with that person. I'm not saying it, like it's a exact 1-to-1, but you know what I mean. There is this sense, I think, where we as Christians having been gifted by God many things for ministry, whether it's prophecy or encouragement or compassion or teaching, whatever that might look like. And Romans 12 gives us, numerous examples of what the church is meant to do and what it looks like. It's difficult to actually go and do these things, not because it requires effort, but because we have to remember and almost be continually taught that God makes the unworthy worthy, and that being made worthy is not just a simple declaration, although it is that. It's a way of existing, because I think for us, we've been kind of browbeaten into this sort of submission hold where we believe we're not good people, and how could God love us? And we get kind of fixated on ourselves, right? And it's not that we get selfish, but we get kind of tossed down our own rabbit hole, right? It's very easy to get focused on those things. But the gospel is, of course, the power of God unto salvation. But the gospel is also this grand proclamation that Jesus is Lord, and he makes the unworthy worthy. And he does so not because of some sort of innate, kind of ontology where he has to do things or anything like that. He does so because he is love. His mercies are the very bedrock of how he interacts with sinners and the broken and the decimated and the destitute. And that's what Romans 12:1 is all about. On the basis of God's mercies, and it's in the plural there, it's not mercy, it's mercies, that God's activities, that God's working in the world is seen not just in the giving of gifts, but in his very nature, how he acts toward us. That he views us as objects worthy of mercy tells us far more about ourselves than we're comfortable with. That God's love, that God's compassion, God's care is given to the wretched, the broken, the sinful, and so forth, but not in a way that just absolves them, but calls them, that calls them out of the brokenness, the sexual immorality, the violence, the hatred, the bigotry, all those sorts of things, and calls us into a new way of existence, not on the basis of anything we've done, but on the basis of God's great, gracious mercy. And to experience the mercy of God is a shocking and disorientating thing, because we're not used to it. We're not used to mercy in the world. We're not used to kindness. We're not used to generosity. And when we experience it, we almost don't know what to do with it. Like if Elon Musk walked up to you and gave you $1 billion, just here's, $1 billion, and just walked away, and you look at your bank account, your whatever bank you have, Wells Fargo or something, and you look and say, yep, there's $1 billion in my checking account now. Like what on earth do you even do? You know what I mean? Like we almost don't know what to do. I know what I would do. I mean, I'd go buy books on Amazon, but and buy some honey. But it's one of those where you just got to see very quickly. It's like our bodies are almost not ready to accept things like that. And yet for Paul and for the early Christians, the idea that God acted towards humankind in mercy shows us how much God actually values humankind, how he values human life, how he loves us. And that we are called not just to be reconciled with him or to him, but also to live the gifts that he's given to us in a way that brings honor and glory to him. And how do we honor Jesus Christ? Well, it's like you use the gifts he's given to you in service of him, in service of the church, in service of the world. It doesn't mean everybody has to become a pastor or a priest or a prophet or what have you. But it does mean that there is nobody in the church that should not be there and has not been empowered to do good things in God's world. And so maybe reflecting as the new year approaches very, very soon, it feels like it's too soon, reflect on God's mercies. How has God worked in your life to bring you into new things, into new places? How has God shown his love to you through others, through answered prayers, through joys, through good things? What gifts do you have that can be used in service of the church and of Jesus Christ? What gifts do you hope you have? What gifts would you like? Gifts are not an ontology. They're not like a Pokemon card or something. Rather, these gifts are given by God. And part of being a Christian is learning to discern what the will of God is, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And part of that discernment process is reflecting and praying about what God has given you, asking God to reveal that to you, talking to friends and family and people you trust. Maybe they've seen, a call to ministry in your life. Maybe they've seen your love of advocacy for the homeless. Maybe they've seen how you treat others and how you view food as a spiritual gift and feeding people as a great act of hospitality. Having a home that is open to people regardless of their socioeconomic status, right? All of these things are just appetizers on the table of God's great kingdom. And so I hope and pray that you are empowered and encouraged to love and serve the Lord through the gifts given, that you might find joy and rest in this new year. If you are looking for a home church, we worship at 28 Moccasin Lane, Rolling Hills Estates, California, the First Baptist Church of Palos Verdes, at 11 a.m. every Sunday. We're going through that discernment process now. And I've asked the church, my church, small as they are, though mighty as they are, to be in prayerful reflection about how to spiritually and numerically grow in the new year. We've got a whole year to figure out who we are called to be in the world, in the church, in the city, in our lives, and in fellowship with one another. And so may this stir you to think and reflect and pray about what the Lord is doing and has done and will do. And may the peace of Christ be with you in all that you do. Merry Christmas, and of course, Happy New Year.